for those of you just coming in, I need you to grab a new note sheet and a blank piece of paper.
Why blank?
Because it'll all make sense when we get to it.
They don't like that while you're in here?
No, okay, that has nothing to do with you.
Does it involve your school?
Alright. There's this one. Okay. Is this everybody?
I think I burnt it.
Are we missing people? Who's all missing today?
Jaden Davis is at it.
Jaden Davis is here?
Ben is here, but
Okay. He's walking in right now.
I know.
All right.
I think I burnt
Oh, you got it? I'll get it. Okay. Danica, please sit down just for today. I promise. All right. So, yeah. A new note sheet and a blank piece of paper. All right. Because we will be doing something. You can go to the bathroom after I explain everything.
I'm being recorded. Yeah, we're being recorded.
Huh?
What? Recorded for what? Recorded. So we
Because I'm being observed, so no yelling. Okay, all right. Alright, so yeah, you need a move. That'll work for me. Alright, everybody got one? Everybody's good for the most part? Those of you who are here?
Are you nervous?
No?
What are you feeling?
So-
Don't be bad.
Okay, so anyway, the first thing I want you guys to do while I'm doing attendance is if you go into your Schoology folders, alright, so get into Schoology, and there is if you go to the Unit 5 folder, there is a personality quiz that I want you guys to take for me, alright?
About us.
No, well, I mean, it is a little bit about you, it'll tell me about you, okay? Do you have your computer right?
Yeah.
Alright, can you get it out for me? Give it?
It's like how was that?
No.
Good.
Yeah, it's not a graded test. It's just a little personality thing, just a fun little tidbit to get us rolling. Okay. So it'll be at the Unit 5. It'll be all the way at the bottom. It says personality test, and it takes you to a link, but you can't click on the link. All right. So you have to copy and paste it into your. Hold on, Bryce. Who else needed to go to the bathroom? Was it Kara? Kara? Okay.
Who?
Huh? Essentially. Let's stay focused. Alright, did anybody have any questions about what they need to do right now? It is in the Unit 5 folder. Alright, the Unit 5 folder, you will see a personality test. Oh, what? It's not a really clever scam. I'm not trying to get your information. You're welcome. Okay, so this will just tell you. So, no. Oh, you're not even the. So this one, go to the Unit 5 folder, and there will be a personality test. Copy and paste that link into your search box or whatever. Give it? Copy and paste, so highlight it. Yeah. Try not to highlight that top. I think it's easier if we start from the top. Was that Caleb? Yeah. So read those statements. I think there's 10 of them. And then using the blue buttons, indicate whether you agree, disagree, somewhat agree with them. So is it okay, do you think it is okay to get ahead in life by cutting corners? Do you definitely agree, somewhat disagree? You know, is it okay to take shortcuts? So do people trick you easily?
How do we go to the next
Yep, so copy and paste that into your URL thingy, all right? All right, and this will tell me how close to Machiavelli you are in terms of political beliefs.
I can't agree on all of them.
You couldn't agree on all of them?
No, so what if
I honestly don't know.
that one's okay?
Yep. So then copy that and paste it up there, and you'll get where you need to go. Huh? What is? So, it's not really a question, it's more of a statement. So do you agree that lying is not as bad as it's made out to be? Right? Do you think it's okay to lie, essentially what it's asking? I tell people what they want to hear in order to. So, do you tell people lies to make them like you? Essentially, is what that question is. A mild indication. So that means you are not very Machiavellian. So, I feel safe with you in the room, Dan. Same with you. No. The green is you're not very Machiavellian. So you okay with it? So go. So go to that unit 5 folder. Yep. And follow that link. It'll take you where you need to go.
I got yellow.
Right in the middle, pretty much, if you read that paragraph, it'll tell you.
Parents is a moderate degree of Machiavelli.
Yeah, so it means you're right in the middle. So you some would agree with them, some would don't. More or less, we'll get into what that actually means.
Does that mean good?
What about you? I'm curious about yours.
What do you mean? What color do you get?
You got green. She's right in the middle, just like yours.
Oh, come on.
But I
I'm
think
kind of
mine's
surprised about
farther
yours.
towards the red than yours.
Me?
Yeah, mine's farther.
Why?
Mine's like
I'm not a god person.
I'm not so that's a common misconception there, though. It's not, Machiavellianism is not about being a good or a bad person.
Wait, it's not
It means you're kind of in the middle, but you're leaning towards Machiavellianism. So it's not about being a bad person, it's about being an effective leader.
Oh.
So
I don't know.
his whole deal is essentially, so his whole idea is essentially, you do what it takes in order to be a, what was that?
Get something done.
Yeah, it's like, exactly. So the ends justify the means is really the term that's kind of associated with it.
Wait, what's green?
Yeah, copy and paste it.
That means you're not.
Well, I'm in yellow.
Control C.
I'm like white.
Control C.
So don't look at
And then go to accept. You guys quiet down for 1 second. And then Control V. I'll take it. Alright? That is for what we're going to be doing in like 2 seconds. So patience is key here. Yeah, Jaden. Yeah, if you want to do another one for fun while we're talking about it, you can. To see how much things change. Alright, so essentially, what Ben said is exactly right. It is all about being an effective leader, getting things done no matter what the cost. So if you're a Machiavellian, you're okay with lying when you need to, cheating when you need to, being manipulative, again, when you need to. Alright?
yes.
If you already took it once, we're not going to worry too much about it then. Yeah, Isabel? That means you don't really agree with Machiavelli. You have a little bit different thoughts on things than him. Alright? So, what was that? Endear means to make someone like you, essentially. Alright?
Yes.
So let's get out those blank sheets of paper that I handed, or that you guys grabbed on the way in. Alright, and I want you to make a Venn diagram for me. Okay? If you don't know what that is, it's the overlapping circles that I have up there. I would keep Schoology open because we're going to use it again. Or not Schoology, but keep your computers handy because you'll be doing something else with them, alright? So just keep them ready to go so we don't waste time, alright? What was that? If you need to shut it, that's fine. Just make sure you keep it out and ready to rock, alright? Yes, Carrie, get that? Okay. So, I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds or so to think about leadership traits that you want in a leader. So how many of you are in sports or anything like that? Pretty much everybody. But if you're not in sports, it even applies. Think about people in authority positions like teachers or parents or politicians. Anybody who is some sort of leader, what sort of traits do you want them to have in general? All right. Yeah, Kara? Oh, just give me 30 seconds, and then we'll start going over it. Just keep it in your head, though. As long as it's some sort of circle, you are perfectly fine, Kara or Kayla. Huh? don't know if it'll be fun, it'll be interesting to see what you guys come up with. I've gotten some interesting answers so far. Okay, you guys ready to rock? Kara, what were you going to say? Responsibility. So as I'm writing these up here, fill in your own, okay? And, oh, what? Yeah, we'll just keep it quiet, we can't deal with that. Alright, so while I'm writing these up here, follow along, and,
Yes.
yeah, label one of your circles Machiavelli.
Okay, so I'm down with got it, or not got
I'm just gonna answer.
tenants.
I was gonna say-
Okay,
Okay, Kara, what did you say? Responsibility?
Hey, Matt.
That's a good one.
go down to tenants.
You know where you come in the front door?
Oh, loyalty.
Loyalty? That's good. I haven't heard that one yet today. Loyalty, that's a good one. What was that? Jaden, what do you have? Honest? That's a good one. We'd all like to think that we want our leaders to be honest, especially, politicians. You don't like politicians to lie to you, right? To lie to your face. Kevin? Confident? You have one, Kayla? She said confident. What? You don't have one? Danica? Trustworthy? Yeah, follow along. You don't have to write all of them, but, try to write a few. Alright, so we got responsible, loyalty, honest, confident, trustworthy. Anything else kind of standing out to you guys? Ben?
Never give up.
Okay, so I guess resilient, probably a good word for that. Resilient, we'll go with that. Resilient. What was that? Did someone say equal, right? We can go with fair. That's probably fair. All right.
Hey, Lynn, I'm sorry. I'm trying to film my student teacher.
I probably spelled it wrong.
And
Yeah.
Matt on
I
top of this stuff. So you have to
I
send
think
it
it's
back.
RESILIENT, resilient. I'm probably wrong.
Sorry.
Free silent. No, that's how I spell
Yeah,
silent.
I know I butchered it, so don't worry too much. I'm not going to judge you on spelling. All right, so that's a pretty good list. All right, so Machiavelli kind of would agree with some of those, I would say. His whole thing is more or less, like Ben said earlier, the ends justify the means. So pretty much any trait you want to choose, as long as it fits into helping you win whatever your goals are, right? So that we'll talk a bit more about him when we get through the notes. All right, so if you guys want to pull your notes out for a second. You'll need the ones from yesterday, right? We're starting on those, but we will get to the ones that you took at the beginning of class. Yeah. What's up, Jaden? Yeah, keep that out. Put your names on it. I will be collecting these after class just to give you guys a couple of points for playing along. All right. So as long as you participate, you'll get your points. Okay. I would close them, but keep them handy because we will be getting back into them. All right. Hunter, can you hit the lights for me?
Yep.
Or just one of the lights should be plenty. That one works. Thank you. I think we are. We're starting with the slide that says Republics of Italy. And I'll just get all this up here so you can. This is pretty much a review of what we went over yesterday, so I'll just put that up there while we talk. All right, it's kind of a review from yesterday. Remember we were talking about the Medici family, how they ruled Florence, right, and how they were patrons of the arts. Well, they start to come back into the story with Machiavelli because Machiavelli works for them for quite a few years. But specifically Lorenzo. So when Lorenzo de' Medici takes control of Florence in 1469, he kind of more or less overthrows the Republic. He kind of fills all of the government seats with people loyal to him because he's rich enough and influential enough to do that, right? Okay, so he takes control of the government. Okay, and he rules for 20 some years until 1492. You don't necessarily have to remember that date, but that's the same year that Columbus set sail, so 1492. Just so that kind of sets the context as far as timelines go. So it's right around the time of Columbus is when all this is happening. Okay, and Machiavelli works for Lorenzo de' Medici as a diplomat during this time. All right, he was pretty well educated. Machiavelli himself was pretty well educated. His father was a lawyer. He grew up with a pretty good, strong education in political theory, history, law, all that sort of deal. All right. And he ends up working as a diplomat for the Medici family. Who can tell me what a diplomat is? Or just a general idea? Okay. No? Anybody? Essentially, a diplomat's job is more or less to go to different places, like cities, and negotiate treaties and agreements. All right, so that was essentially his job while working for Lorenzo de' Medici. All right, but then in 1492, the Medici family gets ousted, they get exiled, and the Republic of Florence gets reinstated as its own little republic. Right, so the Medici family gets kicked out. And this is kind of kicked off through the events of what's known as the Bonfire of the Vanities. So this guy named Savonarola, I think he's a Dominican friar. I'm not sure if that's the right term. He was some sort of friar. And he was one of those dudes that took a vow of poverty, and he believed that anybody who had wealth should use that wealth for the betterment of God and the church, and that if you weren't using that money to help people and you were spending it on luxuries, you were a bad person and you were pretty much evil, I guess is the best way to put it. He thought that the Renaissance was corrupting the soul of Florence. And he convinces a lot of people to join him, right? Because most people are poor. And it's pretty easy to convince poor people to get mad at the rich, especially people as rich as the Medici. All right, to look at all the things that the Medici has and to get people fired up. And so in 1492, you get this Bonfire of the Vanities, which is essentially an event where these huge mobs of people, kind of spurred on by the Savonarola, they kind of ransack the city for all of this art, fancy clothes, and musical instruments, pretty much anything that is any sort of luxury, and they kind of pile it up and they burn it all in this massive bonfire. So they kind of symbolically, or not necessarily symbolically, but they purge the city of all of these luxuries. All right, and this dude Savonarola ends up getting executed by the Pope. Why would the Pope do that? Why would the Pope execute a priest for burning all this stuff? What does the Pope and the Medici have in common, Jaden? Exactly, they're both rich. Good job, and they're both rich. So the Pope is looking at what's going on in Florence, and himself, he's paid for all of this art. If you look at the Sistine Chapel, we'll look at it next week. We'll look at a bunch of different arts. So the Pope himself is a patron of the arts. The Pope himself has tons and tons of luxuries. And he doesn't want people spreading this idea that luxuries are bad because he doesn't want people to turn against him. All right, so he has Savonarola executed, actually burned. So, so this dude who burned all this art ends up getting burned himself. Okay. So kind of fitting, kind of a fitting end for the most part. But anyway, so the Republic of Florence is kind of reinstated. This is the Palazzo de' Medici. I just think it's an interesting building to look at. It's not really outwardly impressive, but the inside is very luxurious. All right. Again, this is stuff kind of we went over before. So we'll just continue the story about the Medici. So, after the Bonfire of the Vanities, the Medici family gets exiled, all right? But Machiavelli gets a promotion. He ends up, when the Republic of Florence gets reinstated, he ends up as a secretary for one of the members of this governing council in the Republic. And the secretary is not, like the people who do, the typing and the letter sending that we think of today. It's not like a clerical work. He is pretty much the right-hand man of this guy. Okay? So he's right hand, yeah, Bryce.
Do you have a hole puncher?
A hole puncher? Yeah, right over there. So he's right hand man of the dude. He gets a promotion. And he spends the next 20 years or so working for the Republic. More or less, doing odd jobs he spent some time as a general, spent some time as a secretary, a little bit more time as a diplomat, all that sort of stuff. But then, about 20 years later, the Medici family gather an army and retake Florence. And they're looking at Machiavelli, who kind of benefited from them being exiled. And they know Machiavelli, because Machiavelli worked for them. They know how he feels about how to get ahead in life, how you should do whatever's possible. So they kind of think that he might have been a traitor. So they exile him. And he's exiled for about a year. And then they just straight up imprison him. All right? And while he's in prison, he gets tortured because they're trying to get a confession out of him. Okay? And they don't. He does not confess. And they never find enough evidence to convict him. Right? Are we all good for me to keep rolling? This is
No,
fine.
no, hold on.
Oh, you need more seconds? Okay.
Yeah, I need one more.
You're fine. All right, so they don't have any evidence that he was a traitor, or at least not enough evidence to keep him in prison. So they let him out, and he kind of goes into retirement. And it's in this retirement where we get the most important works out of him, as far as writing goes. I mean, he spent his whole life writing. He wrote some poetry and some, other, books here and there. But after he retires, you get the two big ones. You get the Discourse on Livy, which is like a history of the Roman Empire sort of deal. It's actually pretty interesting if you guys ever want to read it. I doubt you ever will, but it's a good book. And you also get The Prince, which is more or less a guidebook, a handbook for how a leader is supposed to act in order to maintain power. All right? We'll get to that more. Are you good to keep rolling? You got it written down? Cool. Okay, so Machiavelli. This is a portrait of him. That's what he looked like. And we already talked about that. All right, so his big deal is pragmatism. He becomes kind of the father of the philosophy of pragmatism. And the idea is what does it mean to be pragmatic? If someone calls you pragmatic, what are they calling you? Caleb, do you have one? No? Nobody? It's essentially, you look at things in a realistic way. You recognize the way things are, and you look for realistic solutions. All right? And so what is the solution that Machiavelli is looking for? He's growing up, not necessarily growing up, but living in this time period where Italy is not united. What is it? What is it made of? Instead of one unified Italy, what is it? Yes, city-states. All right, so it's a bunch of different city-states. They're all disunited, and they're all almost constantly at war with each other, right? And he's looking at this, and he's a historian himself. He's reading about the Roman Empire, and he's looking at what's possible when the entire Italian peninsula is united under one strong leader. And he's kind of wondering, how do we get back to that? Or not necessarily how do we get back to that, but how do we reproduce that in the modern day? Right? He's looking at the different emperors and kind of wondering, he's looking back then, seeing how they had a strong emperor and they were able to unite Italy and conquer most of the world. And now, in his time, it's all everybody, all for one, one for all. They're all themselves, holed up in their cities, fighting each other. Nobody's really strong enough to unite Italy, let alone project power outside of Italy. All right? And that kind of, so he writes this book as more or less a guide for leaders to rise to power and stay in power. And what sets him apart from different writers from the Catholics, when Catholic writers were writing about leadership, they kind of promoted what the ideal Catholic leader would look like. Values that Jesus would have went by. Honest, fair. They wouldn't be murderers. They would, be merciful. Merciful is probably the big one. right? But he's kind of looking around at the world and he's going, the world is not ideal, right? People are not perfect, and you need to be able to lie, you need to be able to kill in order to keep power if that's what you want, all right? Otherwise, you're going to fail. Okay? So that's his whole big thing, is he's trying to tell people how to be an effective leader. Okay? That makes sense to everybody so far? All right, cool. You guys still writing? We good to roll. This is the last set of notes that you need for the day, so when you're done writing, what's up, David? Tissue? Okay, so, yeah, if you remember anything about Machiavelli or the Prince, remember he's all about effective leadership, okay? Not necessarily, a lot of people kind of get the mistaken impression that he wants you to be cruel or that he wants you to be evil. That's kind of the impression that he kind of gives off in the book if you don't read it carefully. But he's really just kind of telling us this is the way things are, and whether we like it or not, this is the way you need to do things in order to stay in power. All right? Okay. We're all written with the notes? Okay, so what I want you to do is get up your computers again. We're going to read a little bit of The Prince, okay? And the link on Schoology hasn't been working for anybody today so far, so I'm just going to have you get onto Google, all right? So get onto Google. Okay? And I have it written up here in green above the PowerPoint where it's going. I'll turn this off so you can actually see a little bit. So I want you to Google The Prince Common Lit. All right? The Prince Common Lit. Okay? Yep, perfect. Kayla has it. Let me know if you have issues. Google The Prince Common Lit. It should be the first link that pops up. Kayla, what's up? Yes. I don't think it matters if you put a space in. It'll probably pop up anyway. The Prince Common Lit.
It's on the board.
It's right there at the top of the board if you need help. Okay, Danica has it. Kaylin has it. Good job, Ben. Or Hunter, sorry. Yep, you're right. Huh? Yeah, so just Google that for me. It'll take you where you need to go. All right? Yep, you're good, Jaden. Yep, good job, Kara. Yep. Yeah, you can exit out of that personality test. You're not going to need that again. That was just a little sort of fun thing to get us rolling. Okay, and while you're reading this, let's see, what do we have until 53 or 57? I'll be right over, Bryce.
57.
Is it 57? So I will give you guys until, let's say, 1:50. So that's what, 8 minutes or so to read through this. Okay, so yeah, okay. So read through this, and I want you to think about whether or not, based on what you're reading, whether he would agree with our list. You know, what sorts of, how would he feel about a leader that we've described so far? Yep, you're in the right place. Okay, so I think everybody's got it. Cool. Yeah, David. Okay. Okay, and don't worry about the questions that pop up. You don't have to answer those. It is a little long, but it's it's only 4 paragraphs. So, it's okay if you don't completely finish reading all the way to the bottom. Get through as much as you can in the next 7 minutes. Okay. All right, and again, just read that and think about the sort of leader he would want sort of leader he wants to be in charge, and whether or not he would agree that a leader with those traits would be somebody that he kind of supports. All right, that's the way to look at it. And there is if you run across words that you don't recognize, there is a little dictionary down at the bottom, Right, so if you scroll all the way down, it has some of the harder words defined down there for you. All right, just in case. And if there's one that's not listed there, let me know and I will help you. Yeah, it is. Pistoia is a city. So that's a city in Italy. Or a city, yeah, city in Rome, I think. Yeah. And just another thing to keep in mind, Machiavelli never actually lived to see this book published. He kind of finished it while he was in retirement, and then he died, and they found manuscripts in his house and kind of published them. All right? And the church really didn't take too kindly to it. Why would the church not take very kindly to it? Okay, okay.
Because it says like you should, kill.
Yeah, it doesn't sound very Christian, right? If you're reading it, not really understanding what he's trying to get across, it does very much sound like he's telling people to go kill and lie, right? I mean, he's saying you should be able to if you need to, but he's not really advocating for that. So when this book does get published, there's a huge backlash, especially from the Catholic Church, and like so much of a backlash that the Pope bans the book, and if you get caught with it, you would get put in jail. So, so it was very controversial in its time when it came out, and it kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Right? But again, we're talking about people who wanted to see the world as ideal. Pretty much in the same era, you have writers like Sir Thomas More, who lives in England, and he writes a book called Utopia. Right? And he's kind of describing society, or a perfect society in his mind, or a society that's so perfect it doesn't really need a government. So you have a lot of people writing about ideal worlds, ideal societies, kind of more philosophical things, whereas he's focused on the reality of here and now. This is a situation Italy is in, and if you want to be an effective leader in Italy, you need to be able to do these things. All right. So he's not necessarily advocating for it. He's just saying you should be prepared to do it if you want power. You got another 4 minutes. Evan. Yeah. I forgot to tell you guys, there's a new policy. So when you guys come back with the pass, you've already been made aware. You gotta just put it up, equip it up with that clipboard. Don't throw these away. You done with your reading, Bryce?
No, mine's gonna go to updating his card off if I put it back on.
Okay, cool. about a minute and a half, and we'll get rolling with it, all right? So just in general, how do you guys feel about reading the primary sources instead of reading the textbooks? Is it generally a little bit better? You want me to keep rolling with the primary sources instead? Okay, well, I'll do that as much as I can. All right. It's a little bit more interesting to read from somebody who actually, their own words. Yeah, did it? Yeah, after Caitlin gets back. All right, so let's talk about this a little bit. What sort, just kind of reading through that, what sort of sense of, what's your opinion of what he's saying in general? David?
I somewhat agree with it.
Yeah, you someone agree? That kind of matches up with your test, right? It was a little kind of that way, right? Were you going to say something on there? No? Anybody else? What about you, Ben?
I agree with these things.
You agree with Cole? Yeah, I would say so too. I mean, in an ideal world, you don't want a politician who, is cruel or who lies, but sometimes reality kind of gets in the way. It's hard to live in an ideal world, right? What about just generally? I think in the beginning he's talking about clemency, which just means mercy. What is your guys' view on his opinion as far as that goes? You don't agree? You think we should be able to give people mercy? All right, fair enough. So no? Oh, Ben's taking a hard stance. No mercy? Depends?
Depends.
Yeah.
Can you watch Cobra Kai?
Okay.
What?
Can you watch Cobra Kai?
I don't even know what that is.
Have any of you guys watched Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, so nobody in the other classes has. But this is very similar. So if you watch Game of Thrones, a lot of the politics that goes on is very Machiavellian, especially with Cersei. They're doing whatever it takes to take control of that throne. So that's a very good way to think of Machiavellian politics, is to think of that show, if you've seen it. All right. But yeah, one of the big reasons why he doesn't think mercy is really good in general, what if you're merciful and you spare somebody, and then they come back and stab you in the back? Who needs to go?
Exactly. That's what I said.
Yeah, so,
That's why I don't want people to get second
None of the
chances.
girls
Yeah.
can go to the bathroom upstairs.
what was that?
None of the girls can go to the bathroom upstairs.
Why?
I didn't do that because the toilets are flooded.
Really?
All the floors flooded.
Sorry.
So you walk all the way downstairs. You need to walk all the way downstairs. I didn't go. Yeah.
But yeah, that's why everyone agree with him. Like,
Yeah.
you give someone like too many chances, like, and then keep screwing up.
Yeah.
When does it
But yeah, that's some very good points, Ben. If you do give somebody some mercy, they're very likely to turn around and do the same thing again to you. So Machiavelli is pretty against giving people mercy. So let's just kind of run through this list real quick. Are there any traits on there that kind of stand out that Machiavelli would or would not agree with? Just kind of get the obvious ones out of the way. What about fair? Let's start at the bottom.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Fair? Do you think he would want you to be fair?
Sometimes, I mean, like, it depends, like, what it is, because, like, if you want,
Yeah.
says, like, if you gotta do what you gotta do. you
Yeah.
gotta do what
Sometimes play fair, but if playing fair puts you at a disadvantage,
you- exactly.
don't play
You
fair.
gotta cut
so that's pretty much hits the nail on the head with that one, Ben. So Machiavelli's whole thing is he doesn't care about anything other than whether you are effective. All right? Whether you are effective or not. Okay? And if you are a nice ruler and you get your people to love you and everything goes well and you're able to use that love to build the state up and make good decisions and you're an effective leader, he's okay with that. But if you need to use some violence and manipulation or to make the playing field a little unfair into your favor, that's also something you should be able to do. All right? So, yeah, very good, Ben. Okay, so for the last 2 minutes, I want you guys to flip those Venn diagrams over, all right? And on the back, I just want you to give me, just kind of as a sort of little closing exit thingy, give me 1 or 2 sentences, 3 if you're ambitious, explaining why Machiavelli thinks it's okay for politicians to lie and whether or not you agree. All right? Just, a couple of sentences on the back of that Venn diagram. And then I'll collect those, and you will get your points for participating with me. Okay? So tell me why Machiavelli thinks it's okay for a politician to lie and whether or not you agree with him. Okay? You got your paper, Bryce? Well, if you pull out, I'm going to be collecting them. So.
Wait, reset the question again.
Yeah, so just tell me why Machiavelli thinks it's okay for a politician to lie. All right, and then tell me whether or not you agree with him. Okay? And then it doesn't have to be long. Just give me, a couple of sentences worth. Works for me. What was that? You didn't have that blank piece of paper that I gave you?
Other on paper.
Yeah, it was in order to make one of these. So if you want to throw it together real quick, just copy it off the board. You still have about a minute. So copy off the board, and I know you were following along, so I'll give you the points. Yeah, Kevin? You're done? Cool. Thank you. All right, and I'll give you guys 2 points for this, just for participating. All right? As long as I get a paper from you, you will get the point. Jaden, I'll cut you some slack if you're in the bathroom. I'm not going to ask you. You have 30 seconds, so I'm not going to bother asking you. I know you were following along. What is that? Yeah, until the bell rings. You only need like 1 sentence. As long as you write something down, I'll be happy. I'm not grading your content. I'm grading that you did it. All right? And that you were generally following along. All right? Thank you. Yeah. It's kind of more of a personal feeling towards the deal. Whether you agree or
Do you
not.
think it's okay for them to lie? For a politician,
Yeah.
do you agree with that? So now I don't agree with him.
So make sure on your way out you straighten your desk and pushing your chairs for me. All right? What you have is fine. Say whether or not you
My
agree.
name's
You're
on the
okay.
Venn diagram.
What was it?
My name's on the Venn diagram.
For me.
States.
I don't know where the dog wrenches are.
States. No.
Yeah, Brett. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. That's perfectly fine. I know you were thinking. I'll give it to you. Cool. Thank you, guys. See you tomorrow.
Mr. States,
Yeah.
I can just hit end.
Yep. And it should. Hold on. Hit. Stop.